Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. Thank you all for connecting once again. I'm really happy to be here today to bring you this technology class. Today we have a very interesting topic. I know by request, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity and fraud and even some best practices that we can do actually when it comes to just surfing on the web itself. Once again, my name is Michael. We work with a company, James and I, called TDM Technologies, where we pretty much specialize helping the senior community. Some of you may already know us with pretty much anything you need tech related, whether it be any consultation, whether it be just help setting things up in particular. We're definitely here to help you out in any one of those aspects. So just feel free to give us a call. I'll put our information in the chat as well. If James can do that as well, just put our phone number in the chat. That way, if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to us. If we're not able to answer those questions today within this next hour and a half or so, that we will be connected. All right. Also, something I want to share, and I'm going to share my screen just now as well. Here on this presentation today, we also have here a QR code. Okay, here on the far right hand side. So if you want to actually see this, or rather save this presentation, you can actually go to that QR code on the far right hand side of your screen, right here where it says scan me. And from there, you can actually download this actual presentation right on your phone. It's literally the same exact thing that I'm going to be showing you today. That's yours to keep, so you can definitely just scan that to gain access to this presentation. If that's a little too complicated for you, you can definitely also reach me out via email. My email is also right there in the chat, which I've just sent right now. You can definitely reach out to me via email, and I can more than happy send you this presentation via email as well if you so prefer. All right. If not, you do have the QR code there at the far right hand corner. You can just scan with your phone, go to your camera application, scan your phone or scan the code, and automatically you'll get access to this presentation, and that's yours to keep. All right. And the very last thing before I get into the actual presentation, as James mentioned, if you have any questions whatsoever, you can definitely direct your questions to James. You can send him a message in the chat, and he'll be able to answer any questions you may have. Also, at the very end, once I finish the presentation, if there's any questions or anything at all that hasn't been addressed, or just any general tech questions, we will also take some time at the end of the presentation to take any of those questions, pretty much like an open forum if there is any questions. All right, so without further ado, let's get right into the presentation, talking about, once again, cybersecurity and best practices when online. So that's pretty much, and fraud is what we're going to be primarily talking about in today's class. All right, so just to give you kind of an outline of what we're going to be talking about in today's class, these are the topics we're going to be covering. So we're going to be talking about password management, the importance of password management, how to create a strong password, some tips for a strong password. We'll also be covering two-factor authentication, as well as VPNs, and securely browsing the web. Okay, don't let the words like two-factor authentication or VPN scare you. In fact, they sound like complicated terms, but in reality, it's actually not that complicated to grasp. So again, these are the topics that we'll be covering over the course of this next hour or so, talking about all of these things. So let's begin with the very first thing. So first is password management. Now, when it comes to password management, the first thing that I like to talk about is a password manager, okay? A password manager. And just to give you a definition of what it is, it's pretty much a password manager is an application that can generate, store, retrieve, and manage all your passwords from different websites, okay? So once again, a password manager is an application, right? Or it could be a piece of software as well if you're using a computer, that can generate, store, retrieve, and manage all your passwords for different websites. Now, you're probably asking, great, right? That sounds like a really good thing. Now, how does this actually do that? Well, what it does, it stores all your passwords in an encrypted database, which gives you an extra protection against hackers. It also ensures that you don't forget or lose passwords, right? Now, the way I like to kind of pretty much break it down is that pretty much what a password manager does, it encrypts. So for those who are not familiar with that word, encryption, pretty much it adds like a layer on top of your passwords. So whenever you try to access, let's say, a website or a login, automatically that password is clothed, right? Like a shirt, I guess you could say, is put on the password, or a piece of clothing, and pretty much covers up the actual password. So you're not able to see what the actual password is, right? So this takes place whenever you log in to, let's say, Facebook, Gmail, your banking. Typically, those are encrypted, meaning that those are securely. People can't see the password when you're actually logging in to those actual websites, to give you an example. So again, when you're saving your passwords in a password manager, it takes your password, it pretty much closes it up, right? Places clothing on it, and it's safely stored in a vault, if you will, which is the password manager itself. All right. Now, there's a lot of things you can actually store in a password manager. The main thing is passwords, of course, but some, which I'm going to talk about in a bit later on, actually store things as well as credit cards, social security, passports, things like that, which are very sensitive information, can also be stored on some password managers as well. Okay, so, but again, the main thing here we're talking about is passwords, but just know that it also can store other things as well besides passwords. All right. Now, the question is, why would you need one, right? And I think this is probably one of the most frequently asked questions that I get. Now, password managers are very highly recommended by cybersecurity experts. Why? Because they offer both convenience and security when it comes to your logins. Now, believe it or not, and I've done this before, and I'm sure some of you, we often use the same password for multiple logins, right? For websites or even our banking, we typically use the same password. Now, as many of you may know, that can pose as a security risk, right? That's a really big security risk, right? Because if you use just one password for multiple accounts, well, if let's say a hacker gets that one password, well, they pretty much have access to all of your different accounts with that just one password, right? So a password manager, as I mentioned previously before, it can also generate long random passwords for you, all your online accounts, and then it stores them so you don't have to actually remember them. Okay, so that's the benefit also of a password manager, that let's say if you're in a situation where you don't know what password to create or you're struggling with a password, you can use a password manager to generate a password for you, which again, it's usually just a mixture of letters, numbers, and symbols in a random order, and it stores it for you. That way you don't have to even remember it. Okay, so these are probably the two main reasons why you would want to consider an actual password manager when it comes to just handling your passwords. Now, are they safe, right? This is another question. Now, password managers, as we mentioned before, use encrypted security, making them much more secure than any other ways of storing. Now, many ways that we, right, probably store our passwords nowadays is by simply writing it down on a piece of paper in a notepad, right? I know I've done that, right? I'm sure some of you have done that or are still currently doing that, right? Now, of course, that is a big risk, because let's say if you're carrying a notebook, right, with passwords, and let's say you lose your purse or your backpack and you have a notebook in there with the passwords, well, I mean, whoever finds that will be able to gain access to all of your personal information or of your logins if you have it written down in a notebook or somewhere where it's easily be accessible, right? Some people save passwords on their phones as well, which again does offer a level of protection. But again, it's still very likely that someone can gain access to their phone and also retrieve their passwords, right? So again, the password manager, it adds those two layers of security by encryption and by storing it, so that way you'll know that your passwords are safe. And to add even more to that, what most or some password managers use is something called two-factor authentication. All right, two-factor authentication. Now, I'll talk more about that later on. But it does make it even more secure. And they are a lot safer, simply put, much safer than not having a password manager, okay? And I see we have a question already, and I'll address it. It says, how do they work across platforms? So that's a question that Mr. Bam Simco asked. So the way they work across multiple platforms is that on your iPhone or your Android, right, if you have a smartphone, you can simply download the application on your phones, and then from there, you'll create a login where you can actually gain access to this system. On a computer, let's say a Windows or a Mac, you can simply go online and you can actually download what's called an extension, right, to your browser, and that automatically will incorporate that part as well into your computer. So again, you simply download the application on the App Store or the Play Store if you have an Android or a iPhone. And if you have a computer, a Windows or Mac, you'll go to the website of that provider, which I'll give some providers to you in a bit, where you can go and actually just download the actual extension to your browser, and from there, that extension is incorporated with your computer if you're using a computer. All right. Hopefully that answered your question, Mr. Bob. But that's the way how it's incorporated with multiple platforms or across multiple platforms. All right. That was a great question. Very good. So now another question is there a cost, right? Is there a cost? Now, believe it or not, many of the password managers will actually offer free versions. But the thing with the free versions that they do limit the amount of devices you can access your passwords from and how many passwords you can store, right? So that's the thing to note is that you'll want to consider if you're using multiple devices, and you also want to consider if you're using multiple passwords, right? Those are probably the two biggest questions you want to ask when it comes to just deciding whether to get a paid version or free version. And I'll talk more about that in a slide in a bit, but just to kind of begin talking about is that those are probably the two main things you want to consider. So do I have multiple devices, and do I have multiple passwords? Okay, and if you do, then you'll want to consider a paid version. If you only have one device, like an iPhone only, or just a computer, no phone, and just one password, one or two passwords, then the free version probably is more than enough. You probably don't need anything more than that. Okay, so free services also offer those limitations. So a paid version is recommended, especially if you have more than one device. Okay, but just know there are free and there are paid versions. And I don't have the prices included here. Prices do vary across multiple providers, if you will. I will give you some providers which you can go online and look at. Most of them do offer monthly. You can pay monthly. Some of them do offer annual payments. Now, obviously, if you do an annual payment, you will save more money. Typically, companies offer you a discount if you decide to go with an annual subscription as opposed to a monthly subscription. All right, so that's just talking about cost. And here we go. These are actually all of the, well, some rather, of the popular password management applications. So 1Password is a very popular one. TrueKey is another one as well that's very, very popular. Kaspersky, which some of you probably heard of Kaspersky. Kaspersky also offers antivirus with computers. They also do offer a password management application as well. LastPass is another great one as well that you can use to store your passwords and other information. And the very last one on the far right is called Dashlane. Again, that's another one that is also very commonly known. Now, again, there's a lot of different companies out there that do offer this same service. But again, these are the ones that I've come to notice are probably the most well-known or most popular when it comes to just having a password management application. Now, one thing I do want to note is that as I mentioned, was Kaspersky. Some also antivirus providers also will offer a password management application in a bundle with other services like antivirus, like identity theft, things like that as well. So if you already have, let's say, like Norton 360 is one, if you have something like that, they actually include a password management application within that subscription. So if you're already paying for, let's say, an antivirus or an all-in-one on your computer, you may already have access to a paid version of one of these applications or one that's already incorporated with the antivirus provider, like Kaspersky, like Norton. Okay, so if you're paying for antivirus, I would look into that to see if maybe you already have this this system, if you will, already incorporated in your antivirus. If not, then again, these are just some great options you can look at when it comes to paid and when it comes to just free versions if you're looking into getting into this. All right. So again, 1Password is a great one. TrueKey, Kaspersky, LastPass, and Dashlane. All right, these are the most common ones. Now, once again, as I mentioned before, and I kind of touched this already, but these are the questions you want to consider when deciding whether to pay for one or to decide to stick with the free version. Again, as I mentioned previously before, one question is, the first bullet point, do you have a lot of passwords to keep, right? If you have a password for every login, right? Let's say you have one password for your Facebook, one for your Gmail, one for Amazon, one for your banking, like that, then you definitely want to consider going with a paid version, right? Because you have multiple passwords to keep in your actual password management application, right? And the second bullet point, do you use multiple devices or just one? As I mentioned before, if you have a computer, if you have a phone, a cell phone, a smartphone, or a tablet, then yes, you do want to consider having a paid version of a password management. That way you can use them on multiple devices. Okay, now I didn't mention this before, but most of these password management applications, when you go for a paid version, they do offer unlimited passwords and unlimited access to unlimited devices. So that's another benefit, which most, if I'm not mistaken, do offer that. So if you do decide getting a paid version, you do have that added benefit with the password management applications. And again, the last one, as I mentioned previously before, do you require or want extra computer protections like antivirus? So again, like I mentioned with Norton 360, as an example, they do offer the password manager application, theft protection, backup storage. They offer a bunch of things in one package. So if you're already paying for something like this, then you may already have this already incorporated within your subscription, which I would look into if that is the case. Now consider what you're getting for your money with the paid version. Okay, so obviously I always recommend, and I always do this personally, is that whenever I decide to go with something that is paid, I look at all of the benefits, all of the features that is offered to see if it really is convenient for me. If I'm pretty much getting my money's worth, right, if you will. You do want to make sure that if you decide to get a paid version, make sure you're getting your money's worth, right? Look at all the features, all of the benefits, and make sure to use all of them because after all, you are paying for that, right? So definitely look at all those things when looking at these password management applications, or even something simple like Norton 360, which offers that and much more. Definitely have a look at that, okay? So those are the things you want to consider when deciding to get a paid or deciding to get a free version. Very good. Now, we're still under the topic of password management. Now, the next thing I do want to touch upon is password tips, okay? And this, what I'm really talking about here is creating a password or how to create a password, okay? Now, this is equally important to having a password manager because it's important to know what it takes, I guess if you could say, to build a very strong password. And I'll give you good examples of what's a good password and what you should include, all right? Now, the very first bullet point is you want to make sure that whenever you're creating a password, whether it be for a new account, whether it be for a Gmail, an email, whatever it is, you want to make sure it's at least 8 characters long. For those who are not familiar with that, what I mean by characters, I'm talking about letters, numbers, and unique characters or symbols, like the exclamation point, the question mark, the @ symbol, the money sign. Those are all considered unique characters or symbols, which you should use when creating a password. Now, 8 is the minimum. 10 or more is better. Now, obviously, the more characters you have in a password, the longer it will take someone to kind of gain access or figure out the password, right? Now, you don't want to overwhelm yourself and create a password with 30, 40 characters. That can be very confusing. But again, 8 is the minimum. 10 or more is just better if you're deciding to create a password. Now, you do want to include in your passwords lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Okay, and I mentioned what characters are just a moment ago. So again, lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, and special characters. And again, the minimum is 8 characters, but if you have 10 or more characters, then that's definitely a plus because that will ensure that you will have a stronger password. All right, so that's pretty much the very useful tips that you can use when creating a password, or the minimum at least, when starting to create a password. 8 characters, lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Fantastic. So a good way of kind of remembering is the 8-4 rule, which I like to call the 8-4 rule, right? Now, what is the 8-4 rule? So with the 8, when you combine pretty much these two ideas of having 8 characters and having these things that you see right here, this is a combination of both. So let me explain that again. So for example, the 8 portion of the 8-4 rule is having 8 characters minimum. So let's say if you're in front of a computer, right? Let's say for whatever reason you don't have a password manager, you don't have one at all for whatever reason, right? And you don't know what to do to create a password. Well, you can begin by starting out with 8 characters, right? That's the 8. Now what the 4 is in the 4 rule is you want to include 1 lowercase letter, right? 1 uppercase letter, 1 number, and 1 special character. If you add all of those together, that's the number 4, right? So 8 characters, 1 lowercase, 1 uppercase, 1 number, 1 special character. And that's included in part of the 8 characters. So pretty much 4 out of the 8 characters should include these things that we have, what I just mentioned right now, right here. You want to make sure that your passwords include these 4 things. Now the other 4 can be a repetition of that, or it could be just regular lowercase numbers, right? But again, at the minimum, you want to include these 4 things as part of your 8 characters when creating a password. So once again, 8 characters. 4 of the 8 characters should be 1 lowercase, 1 uppercase, one number, one special character. That's half of it. The other half, again, can be a repetition of this, or it can be just lowercase or just uppercase letters, or just numbers, or just special characters to fulfill the 8. All right, so this is one way to kind of begin when it comes to thinking about creating a password. So that's the 8x4 rule. Now, here I have an example of a good password utilized in this rule. So if you look right here at the bottom, let me see if I can, okay, yeah. So right here at the bottom, if you look here, it says bubblegum, right? If you see that, you're at the very bottom portion, bubblegum, right? Now, bubblegum is it's a very easy password to figure out, right? There's not really any complexity to it. Now, if you look below where it says bubblegum, we have here an example of the 8-4 rule, right? So let's count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 characters, right? Remember, the minimum is 8, but more than that is definitely better. So we have 9. Now, if you notice also, we have the 4, right? We have at least one lowercase letter, which in this case, we have actually 5 rather. We have this B, this G, U, and M, right? So that's one lowercase. And we have at least one uppercase, which is this U right here, right? And then we have one number. Well, we have 2 here, but again, the minimum is 1. And we have one special character, which is the exclamation point, right? So this fulfills that 8x4 rule. We have at least 8 characters, and we have at least one of those 4 things that I mentioned before. And again, this is just taking a common word and altering it by including those the rules within the 8x4 rule itself. Okay, so again, you can do that with any common word or something in particular that you'll remember, and kind of alter it, kind of how we see right here, by including those four the lowercase, uppercase, special character, and as well as the numbers included inside of that. Now, I don't have it here on the slide, but just to kind of mention is that you don't, when it comes to create, what you shouldn't do with a password is that you never want to include anything personal. For example, your name, any addresses, any birthdays, any years that are personal to you in terms of, like your birthday as an example. You don't want to include any social security numbers, things like that. You definitely do not want to include when creating a password, right? Because again, that's information that's personal, and someone who knows you may know that information very easily, right? So you do want to avoid that at all costs when it comes to creating a password. Again, this is a great example because bubblegum is something very generic. It's not really something pertaining to anyone in particular. But again, to make it more quote unquote difficult for hackers, something like this that we see right here is a great way to alter that to make it more difficult for someone to figure out. Okay, so that's utilizing the 8x4 rule, and this again is a great example of that in particular. Now, another thing you can do when it comes to creating a strong password is the following, okay? And this is something great if you're totally stumped and you have no idea where to start. This is also another great way to start. So you can start with a sentence or two, about 10 words in total, and think of something meaningful to you, all right? Now, in the second bullet point, I have a great example. Long and complex passwords are safest. I keep mine secret, right? So there we have 2 sentences, and that's something that we just created as something unique. Now, what you can do with this sentence is use the first letter of every word and turn it into an acronym. So let's look at this. So we have long, right? L. So we have the L. And we have that A. Complex, we have that C. Passwords, we have P. R, which is A, right? We have safest, which is S. I, which is I. K from keep, which is the K here. Mine, M, and secret is S. And if you look, this is a total of 10 characters. This is perfect because, again, 10 or more is always better, right? So we have here this. And if you look at this, this is lacpaxictums. That's not a word, right? That's not something someone can easily figure out because it's not a word itself. It's just an acronym for a sentence that was created. So you can create any sentences, again, about 10 words or so, and just take those 10 words, or the first letter rather of those 10 words, and just put them alone. That way you have a password there, okay? Now, again, this is good, but we can make this better. Now, how can we make this better? Well, again, we can use the 4, right? Well, we talked about the 4, right? So we already have here lowercase letters, so that already fulfills 1, right? But we want to also include uppercase letters. So if you look here at the very bottom, right here, right, we have actually 1, 2, three uppercase letters, the L, the P, and the K. So that's number 2. Number 3, right? We want to make sure we include numbers. Here we have 2 numbers, 23. And the last thing is we want to include special characters, which we have here. The at the very beginning, and we also have the money sign at the very end. So that takes the 4, right, out of the 8x4 rule and applies it to this password. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, this is going to be too hard for me to remember. How can I possibly remember this password, right? So again, that's why, going back to what I mentioned earlier about creating a password, having a password management, you can actually store this password within a password manager. And the way it works is that whenever, let's say for an example, if this is going to be my password to my Facebook account, just as an example, I can go into the password manager. I can include in the password manager Facebook, my email, and I can just copy and paste this password and put it in the password manager. The way it works is that once I log into Facebook, whether it be on my phone or whether it be on a computer, automatically the password manager will autofill this password into the password section, and I will gain access to my Facebook. So again, that's why a password management can be useful, because you'll have your password, which in this case would be this one as an example, in the password manager, and then when it comes time to actually logging in, the password manager with the application or with the extension will automatically autofill that for you, and you'll gain access. Okay, so again, this is just adding that extra layer of protection, so that way no one can get real easy access to your actual passwords. Again, it may seem a little complex, but again, it's for added security. Okay, so this is probably the best way when it comes to creating a strong password, and working with a password manager like the ones we mentioned before together in conjunction is great when it comes to just logging in online to different things like, you know, your email, your Gmail, your banking, and things like that. Okay, so very, very important to take into consideration when creating strong passwords. Now, another thing that we're going to talk about is two-form factor authentication. Okay, now again, two-form factor authentication, that is a tongue twister, is also just another extra layer of security to make sure people trying to get into an account are who they say they are. Now, a lot of companies are utilizing this and multi-factor authentication, which is very similar. Companies like, for example, Apple, most banking companies now as well are starting to implement this in their banking applications, and Google as well. They utilize this to gain access or to verify, to make sure you are the person who you say you are. So how does this work? The way it works is, let's say for an example, let's say if I was to go to the Apple store right now and purchase a brand new Mac computer. The moment I log in with my Apple ID into that Mac computer, automatically Apple is gonna send a pretty much like a pop-up saying, okay, it looks like Michael is trying to gain access to this new Mac. Let's make sure it's Michael who is trying to gain access to this new Mac. So what does Apple do? What pretty much Apple does is they actually will send a code to my other Mac devices. I have an iPhone, so they'll send me a message to my iPhone, a code which I'll receive. And once I get that code, I can actually go back to that new Mac and input that code, and I'll gain access to my Apple ID in my Mac computer. All right, so it's another form of authentication for you to gain access to certain accounts like your Apple ID as an example. So typically they'll send you a code, or they may give you an option to answer security questions. Okay, those are probably the two most popular ways of that second form of authentication. So once again, I'll repeat it again. If you log into a computer, right, for the first time, typically they'll give you the option, once you enter the password, they'll give you the option to answer security questions to verify that you are the individual who's trying to gain access to that account. In this case, it could be my Apple ID. Or what they'll do is, as soon as you log in or you attempt to log in, let's say Apple, they'll send me a text message to my iPhone to verify, okay, it's Michael. It looks like it's Michael trying to gain access to his Apple ID. Let's send him a text message to his phone just to verify that he is the individual who's trying to gain access to the Apple ID, right? Again, and this is just another extra layer of protection to make sure you are the individual who's trying to gain access to this account. Okay, so that's pretty much what two-form factor authentication is. Also, this can be known as multi-factor authentication because there's different ways of verifying. Also, if you forget your passwords, you'll commonly see this as a form of verifying that you're the individual that's trying to reset the password. So you'll see this mostly when you're trying to reset reset the password, or when you're trying to gain access to a website with a new device, like a new computer, a new phone. You'll most commonly see this come up in those circumstances. All right, so that's pretty much where you'll see two-form factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. All right, so that's pretty much two-form factor authentication. Now, another important thing to note is a VPN, all right? And a VPN is something that is very, very useful as well. Now, what a VPN is, it's an acronym for Virtual Private Network. It's pretty much a program or an application, if you have an iPhone or an Android device, that you can download on your computer or phone to protect your internet connection. So, by protecting your computer's connection to the internet, you are more safe from hackers, businesses, and trackers across multiple devices. Now, it can be very useful to download devices when you're using them to give access to sensitive information like government accounts, bank accounts, or personal files. And lastly, something called your IP address, which is a number that tells your location, is hidden by a type of virtual tunnel. So once again, just kind of to summarize this in a nutshell, what it does, it pretty much takes your connection and pretty much hides you from others seeing where you're actually connecting from, right, your location, and also secures you from others who may be also online as well. Okay, that's pretty much what it is. And again, this is a piece of software or program that can be downloaded on your computer, or it's an application that you can download as well onto your mobile devices like your iPhone or your Android or your tablet, and you can use as well to just secure your connection and protect you from pretty much anyone who's trying to gain access or cannot see you rather while you're trying to gain access. Now, why are they useful and how to use them? So these are the reasons rather where you may want to consider a VPN. Now, VPNs are great if you are somewhere public, all right? So that's the very first thing. If you're somewhere public, for example, like a coffee shop where there isn't a secure connection to the internet. Let's say if you go to Starbucks and you just want to, let's say, work from Starbucks as an example, or just kind of just chill out in Starbucks, right? Starbucks does not have a secure connection. It's a public Wi-Fi. So pretty much anyone has access to that connection, whether they be the common user or whether they be a hacker, right? Everyone has access or free access to this actual connection. So what a VPN can do, if you're in let's say a Starbucks or any hotel Wi-Fi or anything like that, a VPN will make an unsafe internet connection, like for example Starbucks or let's say a hotel, and make it more secure by encrypting it, right? Blocking unauthorized access to your connection. Once again, going back to what I spoke about earlier about passwords, right? It hides pretty much or conceals your connection, so no one else can see that you're actually connecting to the actual web, and also your location is also hidden when you're connecting on the web. Now, beyond securing your connection, certain VPNs can be used also to connect to your device to servers outside of your actual location. So what that pretty much means is that, let's say if you want to gain access to certain websites that we, for whatever reason, cannot gain access to here in the United States, you can actually use a VPN to connect to, let's say, websites from, let's say, Mexico, right? Or let's say, for example, anywhere in Europe. You can actually gain access to servers or computers or certain websites that are found in those countries specifically and view content from those countries. So pretty much you take your computer connection and you connect to a computer or a server that's somewhere else in another country and view content from there. So a VPN can also be used for that as well, all right? Let's say if you want to watch programming from another country, TV shows, things like that, or websites, again, a VPN can also be useful for that as well. And once again, this can be handy for hiding your location, but also for getting access to certain online content that may not be available in your region, okay? So these are the two or three rather most or the biggest reasons why you may want to consider a VPN. So once again, if you're in a public place and you just want to have a secure connection and kind of just hide your connection, that's great. And secondly, if you want to, let's say, connect to content or websites or servers that are outside of the United States in other countries and things that we wouldn't be able to see normally here within the states. And thirdly, to hide your location. That's probably the last, or is the last reason rather, why you will consider a VPN. Now here, well, yeah, this pretty much here is a great graphic of how a VPN pretty much works, right? So we have us right here, all happy, all smiling here, trying to connect to the web, right? So that's us, right? Now, when we don't have a VPN, so let's assume a VPN is not in the actual picture, right? You pretty much, whenever you're connected to somewhere public, you'll have pretty much access, or rather others who are connected, whether it be somewhere public, will have access to be able to see what you're looking at. For example, corporations, hackers, government, things like that can actually see what you're actually viewing by simply, if you don't have a VPN. So let's say if this is crossed out, we don't have this. Well, again, these individuals can see what it is that you're searching on when you go on the web, or whenever you're looking at certain things or trying to get access to certain content. But let's assume that if you do have an actual VPN, well, again, what a VPN does, it provides a shield, right? It provides this awesome shield, so that way these individuals cannot see what you're actually doing on the web, and it hides your location from these individuals and allows you to safely connect to the internet. And once again, as you look at here on the map, here you see these different lines right here, right? It allows you to connect to multiple servers or different servers across the world to view content that is not normally offered here within the States, as an example. All right, so this is a great depiction of how a VPN actually works.
Hey, Michael, this is James.
Yes, James.
Just to interject, people should be aware that occasionally when you use a VPN, it could slow down your connection a little bit. And also, I've talked to some people that if they want to log into their bank account, they have to be aware and learn how to turn their VPN on and off, because sometimes the banks that you may do banking on a computer would they don't want you to hide your IP address.
Right.
So you have any suggestions around that on how basically turn off and on, right?
That would be within the settings itself. That would be within the settings. But those are, very two important points when it comes to a VPN. And I was going to mention that afterwards, is that it can possibly slow down your connection. So if you're looking for a high speed connection, a VPN may lower or reduce the connection speed. So that's one of the only drawbacks of it. But again, a VPN may not be for everyone, right? So let's say, for an example, let's say if you're at home 99% of the time, right? And let's say you're just simply focusing on connecting to your home computer in your home Wi-Fi, and you don't really plan to go out to a public place, or nor you don't have interest in, let's say, looking at content in other countries, then you don't really need a VPN, right? But again, this is just another option to provide that extra protection if you want to be safe when searching online. Okay, so very important to know that these are just some options that you do have available when it comes to cybersecurity and things like that. But yes, thank you, James, for that. Very important to know. And as well as, just simply turning off and on, which you can do within the applications or the software as well, depending on what VPN you use. Now, these are some of the most popular VPNs. There are quite a few out on the market right now. So these are just some that you can look at. For example, ExpressVPN, Surfshark is another one, Atlas VPN, NordVPN. Norton also, again, as I mentioned previously before, with password management, some companies like Norton, for example, will also include a VPN or access to a VPN within their subscription as well. So again, if you're paying for an all-in-one, kind of like Norton, again, you may already have access to a VPN depending on what package you have. So I do recommend not only looking for a password manager within these companies like Norton, but also look at as well if they offer a VPN, if that's something that interests you as well. Now, if you don't have all that, you can look at these options like ExpressVPN, Surfshark, Nord, Atlas, and you can look at that. And again, these are paid, so just keep that in mind, that by having this extra layer of protection, it does come at a cost. So again, I would just look at each one, look at what they offer, the features, the benefits. And again, as we mentioned before with the password management, make sure you're getting your money's worth, all right? If you see that they offer multiple things that you do need, then I definitely recommend going for that. If not, then perhaps you may want to look for another option. But again, these are just some options that are available out there when it comes to looking at a VPN. All right, so again, Express, Surfshark, Nord, Atlas, and Norton are very popular options. All right, and the very last thing I do want to talk about, and this is pretty much relevant, to fraud, and so best practices that you can use when you're surfing or on the web. Now, again, some of these things may seem like common sense, but sometimes when we're surfing the web and we get all excited, we tend to forget sometimes about common sense things, right? But again, it's important to kind of keep these things in mind to avoid frauds, to avoid scams and things like that when you're surfing the web. Now, the very first thing I have here is you want to make sure you share with care, okay? So what do we mean by that? Be aware of what you share publicly on social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, etc. Okay, believe it or not, most people don't know this, but when you post a photo on Facebook, especially if it's a profile picture, that photo automatically is already going to be documented online. Even if you delete it, it's still going to remain there. Okay, so you do want to make sure that whenever you're posting a photo, whenever you're posting a thought, whenever you're posting a link, whatever the case may be, just know that once it's out, it's out. Okay. So you do want to be mindful of what you're sharing on the web before actually sharing it, right? Make sure that you ask yourself, do I really want to share this? Do I need to share this on the internet, right? So a very important point to consider when you're online, when you're surfing on the internet, when you're on Facebook, make sure that it's something that you feel 100% confident, you know what, I can share this, it's no problem, when you're sharing on social media sites, as an example. Next, you want to think before you act. Okay, and again, this sounds kind of funny, but again, you do want to think before you act. So, a lot of times, a lot of companies, or rather fraudsters, right, will send emails or texts. And as we know, emails and there are communications that create a sense of urgency, such as probably your bank accounts or taxes, and it's likely a scam. Okay, so that's one thing you want to be on the lookout for. A lot of fraudsters or a lot of scammers, what they'll typically do, they'll send you an email saying that your bank account has been compromised, or they'll send you a text message with a link, they wanting you to click on it to gain access to their systems to input personal information like credit card information and things like that, or like addresses or things like that. So whenever you receive an email, right? Whenever you receive an email or you receive a text message, just talking about anything personal, like for example, your banking information. I know when the stimulus check was out, when the government was distributing stimulus checks, a very common scam during that time was that scammers were actually sending text messages saying, "Hey, click here to redeem your stimulus check," right, to anyone. And people would actually click on those links. They would have to input personal information, and of course, it wasn't something legitimate. It was an actual scam. But again, things like that, scammers will take advantage of situations like that to steal personal information. So what you always want to consider is reaching out directly to the company by phone to determine if email or text message is legitimate or not. Okay, that's probably the first thing you want to do. If you're not sure what to do, is reach out to whoever, whatever company is communicating to you. Now, again, some scammers, what they'll do, they'll also include a phone number in the email or text saying, call this number if you have any questions. And again, I don't recommend that. What you want to do is go on Google, find the number of that company, whether it be, let's say, a banking company, or let's say if it's Amazon or anything like that, and look for a customer service number on Google, as opposed to utilizing the number or whatever information they have on an email or a text message. That's very, very important when reaching out to these companies. Okay?
9:30, I think.
Okay, very good. Now, another important thing you want to consider is that when in doubt, throw it out. Now, again, as I mentioned before, clicking on links and emails is often how scammers get access to personal information. If an email looks unusual, even if you know the person who sent it, it's best to delete it. Remember, scammers can commandeer friends' email addresses and send you messages posing as them. You can turn on spam filters for your email account to help filter suspicious messages. Now, this is a common practice, and this is called phishing. And it's not phishing as in going out and fishing, like we do out in the in the wild, but rather what phishing is, and it's spelled P-H-I-S-I-N-G, if I'm not mistaken, or P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G. Pretty much what it does is that scammers, what they typically do, they'll impersonate well-known companies, or they'll impersonate people you know, in order to get you to do things to send them information. Like, I'll give you a very good example. I want to say it was about 2 weeks ago, on Facebook, I actually received a message from a good friend of mine telling me to click on a link to redeem some kind of reward or some kind of prize. Now, when I saw that, I thought that was already very suspicious, right? So what I did is I actually reached out to my friend and asked, "Hey, by any chance, did you send me this link on Facebook? It seemed kind of suspicious, right?" Now it turns out that they didn't send that, right? It looks like someone actually hacked their Facebook account and was sending out spam messages impersonating them, trying to act like them, right? That's an example of phishing, and a lot of scammers or fraudsters will use this in order to gain access to personal information. Again, if you're not sure what to do, right, and it really looks suspicious, just throw it away. That's the best thing. If it's a text message, just simply delete it and don't even entertain it, right? Because the more you kind of think about it or look at it, the more you entertain the thought, the more likely you are to click on that link or click on that message, and do all this. So again, just throw it away. If it just looks suspicious, it looks out of order, just throw it away. Best thing to do. Very good. Now, another thing you can do also is adjust your browser safety settings. You likely search for news, information, products by using an internet browser such as Firefox, Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, and Safari. You can adjust your settings in each of those browsers to set your options for optimum security. Typically, these menus can be found in the upper right-hand corner of your browser, so you can click on those, and also consider clearing your browsing history at the end of your session so you don't leave a trail of sensitive data, okay? So you can always delete your browser history. Now, what I typically do, and this is something that I personally do, is that whenever I'm online or whenever I'm utilizing Google Chrome, which is my browser of choice, what I typically do is go into something called incognito mode. And I believe all browsers offer this, or most of them do, something called incognito mode. What incognito mode does, it leaves no trail behind of your search history. So let's say if you go into multiple websites, right? Let's say if in a day I go into about 10 websites and I search information, once I X out of that browser, automatically the trail, right, that I had is automatically deleted. I don't have to worry about going back into my search history, right? So that's a great way of kind of making things a little bit faster, or not having to worry about clearing out your browser. You can use something called incognito mode, and that will automatically clear your history, and also you can close your tabs out. That way, when you come back, it's no longer going to be there. That's something I typically do when I'm online and searching and just accessing personal information as well. I go in incognito mode. That way, I don't have to worry about leaving a trail behind, let's say, of personal information. So that's another great tip you can use as well when searching the web or when you're on the web itself, is using incognito mode. All right. Another very important thing is log out. So remember to log out apps and websites when you're done using them. Now, leaving them open on your computer screen can make you vulnerable to security and privacy risks. And I'd say this applies to anywhere, whether it be public, whether it be at home, whatever the case may be. Whenever you're accessing a website on your computer, especially like Facebook, make sure you're done. Make sure you log out once you're finished, to avoid having other people, gain access. Even if it's a home computer, still, I would recommend still logging out once you're finished locking your computer. That way, no one else can actually gain access to your actual accounts, right? Whether it be your banking, whether it be your benefits, whether it be your Facebook account, whatever the case may be. Amazon, just make sure you log out once you're finished to avoid being vulnerable to attacks or anyone else who may try to go into your personal devices. And the same thing applies to phones as well. So if you're done with any application or any phone, you definitely can also log out also of those systems automatically in your actual devices. All right. So that's when it comes to just log out. And the very last thing that I do want to mention, and again, we're going to definitely take some time for any questions, if there's any questions about anything we spoke about, if there's just any general questions. But the last thing I do want to touch upon is consider support, okay? And this is probably something very important, that sometimes we can be very stubborn, including myself, and we don't want to look for help. So especially if you live alone or spend a lot of time by yourself, consider a trusted source to serve as a second set of eyes and ears, okay? So what I mean by that is that, let's say if you're unsure about doing something, right? Whether it is, let's say, clicking on a link, whether it's, let's say, if someone is offering you something via email or things like that, you always, if you're really unsure, right? Obviously, as we mentioned before, throw it out, and forget about it. But if you just want a second opinion, always do seek that second opinion before taking any actions. This can be someone who's a little bit more technologically advanced than you, right? It could be a friend. It could be someone who's younger. If you have kids who are willing to help you out, definitely you can reach out to them and just let them know, hey, listen, I received this message today. What do you think about this? Have you received something like this? Again, just to get a second opinion. It does not hurt to get a second opinion, because unfortunately, and this is the truth, is that unfortunately, the age group, the boomers, are the ones that are most commonly attacked when it comes to cyber attacks. Pretty much, you all are the highest, the more prone to getting attacked virtually than the younger generation, like myself, right? So it's very important is that to keep in mind is that to always look for help, especially for those who are more advanced, to kind of help you out from avoid getting scammed or anything like that in particular. So definitely consider support if you're unsure on what to actually do. All right. So that is pretty much all I have for today. Once again here, let me see if I can leave the presentation here on the very home screen. That way, if anyone wants to, once again, gain access to this presentation, you can do so by simply going into your phone camera settings. You can scan the QR code, which I'm going to share right now in a second, and you can actually save this presentation on your phones and view it later on. If not, you can also just simply send me an email, which once again, I'll share my email right here as well. That way you can also view, you can actually gain access to this presentation. So here, let me just do that once more, and then we'll take any questions. If anyone has any questions or anything else they would like to share, you can definitely do so as well. So here, let me just share this. Right, so here once again is the QR code. So here on the far right hand corner, you can scan this code right here, and automatically you'll gain access to this presentation. And again, if there's any questions that perhaps we don't answer today or we're not able to address, you can give us a call at this number here, 561-344-5188. If you want to talk with me, I'm extension 3. If you want to talk to our tech, which is James, that's extension 2. And you can reach out to either one of us if there's any questions about anything in general. But since we do have time, I do want to see if there's any questions. Is there any questions at all by anyone? We will definitely like to take this time to answer any questions.
I have Adele Bernstein, I have a comment. I've downloaded your when you click on that link, you have to download the file.
Right.
Just for people who
Raise
don't know
hand.
that. And the second thing is I have downloaded it. And
Oh, I think you're muted.
Well, I put my hand up. That way I could ask a question. CMS.
Adele, I think you got muted.
so I don't know what you heard. I said for those people who click on that link, you need to download the file because you'll get access to it, but it's just an online link and it disappears when you disconnect your phone. So you can use your camera to click on it and you can download it. You have to actually tell it to download it and save it to files, or download it by sending it to yourself as an email. I've already done that, and I will be putting it, with your permission, on the Computer Club website. So if you weren't able to get this thing downloaded onto your system, I will have it up on the Computer Club website, along with a brief documentation of today's, that we had a session today, and you can download it from there. So I just want to let everybody know I've already got a copy if you can't get it on your own.
Perfect. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Thank you. Fantastic. Very good. All right, Mr. Joseph, I think you had a question.
He's muted.
Yeah, let me see if we can get him unmuted. There we go. Are you still there, Mr. Joseph? I think you were muted before.
Okay, yeah.
There we go. Okay.
We use your location. Should we let them use our location?
Should we, when you're referring to them, who are you referring to?
Well, like if you're on the web and it says something, wish I could remember. You'll get a pop up. Use your location or something.
Okay, that's a great question. So A lot of times, so a lot of applications do that. They will ask you for locations. Now, there are some applications and some websites that do need your location to provide a service that you may need. Now, that will vary. Like, for example, if you're on the internet, right? Let's say you go on Google, right? And you're looking for, let's say, supermarkets near me, right? They're going to ask you, should you share your location, right? In an instance like that, you do want to share your location. That way they can recommend supermarkets within your area. Okay, so I would really say it really depends on why, if you really need to share your location. For example, as I just mentioned, if you need to, let's say, see supermarkets in your area, then yes, share your location. Now, for other things, let's say, for example, I know sometimes Facebook will ask this question as well. If you are not planning to, let's say, share anything on Facebook that requires your location to be shared, then I would not share my location. So it will vary depending on what it is you're looking to do. But if it's something that requires you to, for example, like searching things up in your area, then yes, definitely share your location. Hopefully that answered your question.
Is a laptop safer than the tablet?
Is a laptop safer than a tablet? Well, in all reality, no, not really. I mean, because remember, all devices are connected to the internet, so we're all connected via the internet with these multiple devices. So not necessarily. But following most of the things that I talked about today, with the the passwords and all those things, utilizing all these things are they'll be very useful across multiple devices. So not just a tablet, but a computer and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Great, fantastic. And I don't know if James, I know I didn't ask you, but I don't know if you wanted to interject anything at all as well, or share anything that perhaps I missed or anything.
No, just a couple things. One is don't be afraid to use a password manager. There is a learning curve like any other program, but in the end, you really only have one big password to remember each time you turn on a device. And then if you also need to create passwords, because nowadays we have to go to so many different websites and create usernames and passwords, it's a nice idea to have a generator. They have like this where you can actually don't have to even think about creating a password that's crazy. You can just let it create it for you. So I use a password manager, and I've been using it more and more, and I think it's great. It really saves you a lot of time in the end. So yes, Bob.
When you use a password manager, how do you get it to work both on your PC and on your iPhone?
Well, as sure. As Michael mentioned, there's an extension that you would download into your computer or device. Basically, you would follow the instructions for that particular program on how to get it activated. Sometimes you could create an account with that particular provider, and then as you save your information, some people like this, some people don't. It saves it on their server. So that means that you can go to any device. You go to a hotel and don't even bring your iPad or computer. You can use their computer to log in with your safe password and have access to all of your passwords. So that's a wonderful thing to be able to not have to carry your device. I actually use the same password manager on a computer, a laptop, and my telephone. I use it across all platforms for the same account. I have to log in with the same master password on all of them when I want to use it. And nowadays with your phones, with the biometrics, where you actually just look at your phone and log in, or you tap your button to log in, it allows you to use that. So you don't even, so you can get it to where you could just put your finger on your phone or look at your phone, and it opens up your password managers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Joseph.
I'll see if once we answer all the questions at the very end, I'll see if I can show you my phone to show you what I personally use for password managers. That way you can see more or less what is found inside of them. So once we answer all the questions, I'll go into my phone. I'll share that with you what I use on my phone. But we'll take more questions. I think Adele was first, and then it was Harvey, then Joseph.
Okay, thank you. I use a password manager. I actually use two of them. I use one on my PC, that can be, and if I wanted to, I use LastPass, but if you want it on your phone as well, you have to pay for the fee-based. I won't put my banking information in there. I purposely will not allow them to keep my banking information and automatically sign me into banking. And so whenever I go to any banking website or investor's website, I will not put that into a password manager, and I don't recommend anybody else do it. I have a separate one that I back up on my my hard drive on my PC that I use on my phone. So that one does have my banking information in it. But I highly recommend you pay attention to what you do with your banking information. Things get hacked, and you don't want your banking information hacked. So I use another one on my phone. I do enter it in 2 different places, but you know what? The other thing about it is they don't change password managers easily. If you have 200 or 300 different passwords, changing a password manager is very onerous. So for somebody asked, which one do I use? I use M-Secure.
Or something. I mean, you
So the on my phone I use an M-Secure, and so I highly recommend password managers. They're great. But when you have 200 or 300 passwords, you won't change easily. So you'd have to re-enter them into a new password manager. So choose
Right.
your password manager safely.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Very, very important. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Mr. Harvey, I think you were next. Yeah, you were next after.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, good. I want to thank you for drawing my attention to incognito mode.
Mhm.
I have seen it when I have been checking things out, but I've never used it before. So I think I'm going to start using it on a regular basis. That's number one. I use Google, which is built into Chrome as a password manager. I also have a VPN, and that's Nord, which is
Right.
also a password manager. So I'm in essence using 2 password managers, and I don't know whether or not that's even necessary, but that's what I do. My next question is, because I have a laptop, and the tendency is when I am finished using it at any point in the day or for the day, I simply close it, which shuts stuff down. Now, I'm making a practice of at least once a week completely rebooting the computer so as to reset everything. Is there any recommended time or number of reboots you should be doing, and how often you should be doing them?
That's a great question. James, you want to answer that question? I think you'll probably answer that question better than I would.
As far as rebooting, you could do it probably once a day is a good idea, you know. I didn't catch the first part of that question. Sorry, I was typing an answer.
No, that's okay. That was my question. I wanted to know how often. I was just talking about incognito mode earlier, but
Right.
I just wanted to know how often, or is there a recommended period of time within which you can safely use your computer without necessarily having to reboot it?
Right. It just, every computer is different. The memory on the computer, the strength of the memory has a lot to do with whether your computer slows down, and if it's catching a lot of things that you've been doing throughout the day, and it's trying to remember all this stuff. Rebooting the computer or the phone even is a good recommendation. But generally, I run my power all the way down to 20 or 10% on a phone, particularly, before I would recharge it, and then at that point maybe just restart it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's probably a good thing for other people to know too, that if you're using a laptop or some other battery run device, it's probably a good idea to let it get relatively low before you plug it in again. And I think that's good for the battery.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Very true. Excellent. Thank you, James. Thank you, Mr. Harvey, for
Does
that.
what, yeah, one more. Can I
sure.
ask one more
Yeah,
quickly?
sure.
Does shutting the browser log you out of any particular site, or does the site continue to run on your computer?
It logs you out. It'll generally log you out.
Okay, that was it. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Harvey. All right, Mr. Joseph, I think you had another question. You can unmute yourself. We can answer that question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Okay, my friend has another
I
question.
drop my phone all the time and I crack it all the time, the screen. But so oh, I forgot my other question. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. What was the first question? I couldn't really catch it. What was it?
I always crack my screen on my phone. Is there a better cover on the iPhone?
You're talking about to protect the screen. Is that what you're saying? Like if there's something
Yeah.
better?
Yeah,
Well,
I always crack it.
Well, obviously, when it comes to a phone, you always want to include a screen protector, always. So definitely include a screen
I have
protector.
it.
So you want to make sure that your screen protectors are tempered glass. Okay, that's a very important thing to know when it comes to protecting your screens, because nowadays, unfortunately, phones are becoming more and more sensitive, meaning that they're more fragile than they were 10 years ago. So whenever just adding protection to your actual phone, a tempered glass is always great. To make sure you have that added protection. So if you have that, then that's already the max it really is. You can't really add more. Now you can get a full body case. Full body meaning that covers everything, like an OtterBox. That's a good brand for cases if you want something that's full body, and that will cover the phone all around. So you can have that on top of a screen protector if you'd like. It will add a little bit more protection. Now just keep in mind with that it will be harder to press on the actual screen because you have a lot of stuff on the phone. If that's not an issue, then you can go with a full body case. If not, then again, just a really good tempered glass. Screen protector, it should be good enough. Okay.
Oh, I thought of the other question. If you have a Mac, they say that you don't get hacked as much. Is that true?
Well, yes, and the reason being is because I would say, if I'm James, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think about 75 or 80% of people in the world use more so Windows computers than Mac computers. So that's primarily the reason why people don't get as hacked, because again, not as many people use the actual system itself. Now, that's not to say that you can't get hacked. You can, but the likelihood is less because less people actually use the actual operating system.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Great. All right, so let me show you here my password management system, just to kind of show you on a phone perspective what it kind of looks like. So for those of you who are considering getting a password management system, so here, let me connect my phone, and you should see my phone here momentarily. Just give me a second right now. Great. So this is my actual phone. So I also use LastPass, is the one that I personally use. So that's this application right here. That is actual LastPass. So we can click on there, and I can unlock the phone, as James mentioned, biometrically with just my face. Now, again, as James did mention, and I failed to mention this, is that with password management systems, you do need to create a master password. That's the one password you need to remember at all, well, pretty much at all times, to gain access to the actual vault, if you will, quote unquote. So you do need one password that you need to remember in order to gain access to everything else, okay? Now, again, you can use your phone, if you're using your phone, to unlock it with your screen, or you can enter that password itself. Like, for example, as we mentioned here, these are just some things that you can store. So, for example, passwords. Here I have my Bank of America password and I have my Facebook password. I'm not going to click on it, but right there I have the actual passwords which I can add. If I want to add another one, I can go to add up here and just choose any one of these or anything in general that I want to add when it comes to passwords. So I can, if I have a password for my computer or anything like that, I can also add that here if I so choose to, within the actual password management system itself. So this is with LastPass in particular. Now, again, you can, if you'd like to. I know that it's an option. Again, you can add bank accounts if you'd like. Again, you don't have to. Again, don't feel pressured just because it's there to do it. You don't have to if you don't want to. but you do have multiple things right here that you can add, as well as notes, addresses, things like that, if you'd like to. Okay. Again, this is just an example of a free version. For example, with LastPass, if you decide to go premium, again, as I mentioned in the presentation, they do offer an annual cost, which this one in particular is $35.99, which is a year. It's per year, and you get all of these benefits. So again, unlimited device access, emergency access, which, let's say in case of something happens, you can give someone trusted also access to your vault. So this can be someone, a caretaker, this can be someone who's very close to you, also access to be able to gain access to this information. You can share passwords, logins, memberships, and of course you get that extra layer of security as well. So this is just an example of some features that LastPass in particular does offer if you decide to go with a paid version, right? And like I mentioned in the presentation, if you would consider a paid version if you have a lot of passwords and if you have a lot of devices. There's what you would want to consider upgrading to, let's say, a paid version. And here, as we mentioned before, what I like about LastPass and a lot of these systems is that it can generate a password for you. So let's say, for an example, if I want an 8-character password, right? If you look here automatically and I press these arrows, it automatically creates a password for me. So here I have this VUWN9NM5. This is just a random password. I can use this. Let's say if I was to create a Gmail account or a Facebook account, I can just simply copy this right here on the right-hand side, copy it and paste it on whatever account I'm creating or resetting passwords, and automatically it will be inputted, and you can save that also on your actual vault as well. So this is a great way also to create or auto-generate a password, as James mentioned before. Again, as I mentioned in the presentation, the longer the better. So if you decide to go with let's say 12 characters, well, there you go. You have the 12 characters there, which you can use to generate a password automatically. And here it gives you an option. So once again, this is the 4. Remember that rule that I mentioned? Here it has the lowercase, uppercase numbers, and symbols. So you do want to include all 4 of those when just generating a random password just for added security. All right. So again, this is a great thing that these password management systems do. All right, so just wanted to briefly show you that. Again, this is LastPass, but again, there's a lot of great options out there, and definitely check them out if you're considering that. All right, Miss Judy, I think you had a question. You can unmute yourself.
Unmute. Yes, I had two questions that
Sure.
from what you've spoken about. How do you turn on a spam filter, and where is incognito?
Okay, well that both those things depend on what you're using because they do vary on whatever it is that you're using. Now, when it comes to email, what do you use?
Gmail.
You use Gmail, okay. And for browsing, what do you use?
For brow-
Oh, I think you're muted again. I think you were muted.
for browsing, I use Google
Use Chrome.
Chrome.
Okay, great. So right now, what I'm going to do right here in the chat, I'm going to send you the actual steps. That way you can actually follow along to get access to the spam filter. So here, I'll send this to you, and I'll send it to everyone. That way, if you're interested in that as well, you can actually follow the steps when it comes to just how to access the spam filter. So here, you'll see it right there in the chat itself. So those are the actual steps to actually gain access to the spam filter. Okay, so you can look at that. Now, as far as incognito mode, I can actually show you that. That shouldn't be too difficult to show. So here, let me actually go and share my computer screen, and I'll show you how to access incognito mode. So here, let me share my computer screen. All right, so Chrome is right here at the bottom. So once I actually go here, so I have a bunch of tabs open right now, right? But I can click on here, right? You see where the three dots are on the far right? There you have the option to open a new incognito window. Okay, so you click on Chrome at the top right where the 3 dots are, click on new incognito window, and then there automatically it will open a incognito tab. And this is a great way to pretty much know that you're in incognito mode. Typically the background will be dark like we're looking at right now, and you'll see this sign right here of this man right here with the hat and 2 glasses. Okay, so once again, all I did is when I'm on the regular browser, right? Let's say if you're on regular Chrome, here, let me just move this out of the way, bring this down. Let's say if I open up just a random tab, right? Or just a regular tab like I've had here, you'll just click on these 3 dots here on the far right hand corner, You'll look for new incognito window, and then from there, automatically, you'll be incognito. So now if I was to search on Google, right, I'm in incognito mode. And how do I know? Well, look right here at the top. It says incognito right here at the top right, and it also shows right here the bar at the top is in black. Okay, so that's a great way to know if you're in incognito mode. You look at this little figure, and you'll see here at the top that your browser or your background will be in black as opposed to the normal white color. Okay, does that answer your questions?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
fantastic. All right, great.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And I think we had another question here. So I have some sites I no longer use. How do I delete them and the password? Okay, William. Now that's a great question. So typically, it depends really again because it's different steps for different websites. Typically, all websites will give you an option to delete or deactivate an account. So what I would highly recommend is when you're on, go to those websites, right, and just search for an option that gives you the option to deactivate an account. By deactivating an account, that'll delete all the information of the account, including the password itself. Okay, so for example, with Facebook, I know they have an option where you can deactivate your account and that will remove the password and all the information associated with that account. So I would just recommend look for something that says deactivate account, or just do a quick Google search. Just check out, whatever it is, whatever website you used to visit, and just type in steps to deactivate an account as an example. And from there, you should find a more direct answer if there's a certain website that you want to remove that information from. So hopefully that does answer your question. All right, fantastic. Great. Is there any other questions? These are fantastic questions, by the way. Really good questions. Is there any other questions? Yes, Bob. I think you're muted.
How do you delete browser history on Chrome?
Okay, how do you delete browser history on Chrome? That's a great question, and I can actually show you that as well. So here, give me 1 second here. Let me actually pull that up.
And Michael,
yeah.
in that same area that you're navigating to, there is that passwords on your browser area where that person that asked the question may want to delete the password out of the browser. They can do that.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I misunderstood the question. Yeah, and I'll show that then. That's good. Okay, cool. So let me share right here. So once I go on Chrome, right here, once I'm in Chrome, on the far right again, you have those 3 dots. What you want to look for is settings, and that's right here at the very, very bottom. Right here, you'll find the settings options in Chrome. So you press the 3 dots or tap on the 3 dots on the far right. You'll go to settings. Now, automatically, what you'll go to is privacy and security. Privacy and security. And here you have all the options to actually delete all that information. So if you want to clear your browsing history, like your cookies and your history and things like that, you can click on this, and this will actually give you the option to delete all of your browsing history, as well as if you want to delete the last hour, the last 24 hours, all time, you can delete all that information, as well as passwords. So again, if you have passwords that are logged in already, like Chrome, you can definitely also utilize this step to delete that information as well. And it signs you out of most sites as well if you're logged into sites. So you can just go here and do that as well, just to kind of get rid of all those things. All right, so once again here, let me show you how I got to there. So again, once you're on a browser, you'll click on the 3 circles. And step 2 is you'll go to settings. Step 3 is you'll go to privacy and security. And step 4, you'll go into clear browsing history, and then you can choose right here the steps, or choose whatever it is that you want to delete and how long ago you want to actually delete that information. All right. Hopefully does that answer your question?
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. My
Perfect.
pleasure. Great. Is there any other questions at all? Fantastic. Well, I want to give you all thanks for your attention and for the questions. I'm going to actually hand it back to Miss as well to close it out for us, and thank her and Devoted Health as well for allowing us to present this class in today. Thank you so much, and I'll hand it back to you, Miss.